Hi, and welcome to week 6 of SSCI 4020U Leadership and Admin. Hope you're enjoying the course so far. Your case studies have been meaningful. The discussion posts that you've been working on have been helpful, and that they're helping you to kind of expand your thinking. I also hope that your team assignment is progressing well. So today, this week, our module is looking at courage and moral leadership. In October of 2019, this year I'll be heading down to the International Leadership Association. This year they're hosting their annual conference in Ottawa, and the theme is Leadership Courage. And I've actually will be presenting 6 different workshops. One is called Women Courageous, how women leaders navigate adversity in the leadership labyrinth to lead well. So this issue and this question of courage in leadership is pivotal. Never before in history, I think, have leaders needed this dimension of courage as much as what it is needed today. In a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, leaders need to develop courage. And courage is kind of like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the more you can depend on it. You learn to develop moral courage and leadership courage as you step out and take risks and learn from those risks and act courageously. So our learning objectives for this module then are, number 1, we want you to know and use mechanisms that enhance an ethical organizational culture. How do you as a leader shape the ethical environment of an organization? And culture really disseminates from the leadership through the organization. We want to help you apply the principles of stewardship and servant leadership. So what does it mean to be a servant leader, and what does it mean as a leader to be a steward of the tasks and the organization that you and others are leading together? And then we want to help you recognize and think about courage in others and how you can unlock your own potential to live and act courageously. So those are some of our learning objectives. Some others are that we want to help you effectively manage both up and down the hierarchy in the organization. Good leaders lead from anywhere in the organization, because remember, leadership is influence. And so you can lead and manage both up and down. I want to help you recognize your followership style. Great leaders are always first great followers, and organizations today need effective followership. And there's a lot of research now around followership and what it means to be an effective follower, and how followership affects and impacts leadership. In fact, there is a first annual followership convention in Waterloo this summer, in which people from all over the world are coming together to look at what it means to be an effective follower. And then understand the leader's role in developing effective followers. And you can always tell great leaders are people who develop other leaders. And so how will you as a leader and as part of the leadership be developing the followers who are part of your team? We also want to help you apply the principles of effective followership, including responsibility. Good followers are responsible. Good followers have a service or servant mindset. How do you challenge authority within that domain of followership? How do you participate in change? How do you support change, facilitate change, be a mechanism of early adoption in change? And then also, good followers know when to leave an organization. How you implement the strategies for effective followership at school or at work. So we're going to help you look at those in this week's module. And then we also want to help you as an emerging leader know what followers expect and desire from their leaders, and then how you as a leader can use feedback and coaching to help followers grow and achieve their potential. So let's think about this notion of an ethical climate in the business organization. We know that leaders face pressures that challenge their ability to do the right thing. In a previous module, I mentioned SNC-Lavalin and the fact that 2 executives are now in prison because they bribed officials in a foreign country. We know Volkswagen fudged on its emissions report, and that had a tremendous impact on Volkswagen's share prices and sales. We know that BP, the leadership of BP, cut corners in terms of safety regulations, and that led to the BP oil disaster, North Sea oil disaster, in which hundreds of people were killed, and the oil spill has had a tremendous impact on the environment. And so we realize that leaders face pressures to do the right thing in business organizations. Well, what are some of the obstacles? Of course, there's personal weakness and self-interest. Whenever a leader is more concerned about themselves than the good of society and the good of the organization, they're going to face this pressure to cave, to cut costs and increase profits. That's the number one pressure, I think, that most business leaders will face in organizations and really in any organization, even not-for-profit organizations, government organizations. There is this tremendous pressure to produce more with less, and so we cut corners. The desire to meet the demands of vendors or business partners, and so to look successful. And we can project an image as leaders that is not true, that is not ethical, because we want to appear successful, and of course the pressure to please shareholders. So how do I as a leader set the ethical tone in my organization? Number one, I need to look at how do I act as a positive role model. Words create worlds. And so what we talk about in an organization is what we get. And so as leaders, one of the things we need to be doing is really setting the bar in terms of ethical standards. We need to talk about what we expect and how we determine what is ethical in our organization. But words don't just create worlds. We also then need to act in accordance with what we expect, so that we model the way, as Kouzes and Posner in their best-selling book, Leadership Challenge, talk about. You want to model the way. You never ask others to do what you yourself would not do, and so you act ethically as a positive role model. You also want to focus on the health and well-being of those whom you lead, your employees. You want to focus on the well-being of customers and, of course, the planet and the greater good. And so that'll help you then determine how to make good ethical choices. You want to be honest with employees, partners, customers, vendors, and shareholders. You can think of organizations where there have been real challenges, and they get out in front of those by being honest, by communicating clearly and effectively and truthfully with the public and with their shareholders. As I mentioned, you signal what matters by your behavior, by what you will tolerate and by what you will not tolerate, by what you will accept and what you will then not accept. And you also place your benefits as lowest on the hierarchy of needs. So as I was mentioning, of course, leaders set the ethical tone in an organization, and they do that, number one, or in continuing our previous list, they strive for fairness and they honor agreements. And I think that's really important, that there is a perception of procedural justice. I recently refereed an article in which the researchers were looking at the impact of the perception of procedural justice on transformational leadership. And people will more readily follow your leadership if their perception is that you are fair and equitable in your dealings with everybody in the organization. Leaders share the credit for successes. You can tell great leaders because they give the accolades. They don't seek the accolades. And so leaders share credit for successes, but they take responsibility when things go wrong. I think that's really, really important as a leader to think about. And then you speak up against acts when you believe that they are wrong. And again, that takes tremendous courage because often it can be costly. But if you think that something is wrong in terms of your beliefs, values, and your attitudes, if this goes against who you are as a person, then you need to speak up against that. And that also strengthens your courage. There is a chart in your book on the ethical and unethical leader. The ethical leader possesses humility. In a previous session, I talked about how leadership hubris can really undermine leadership effectiveness, and great leaders are people with great humility. The unethical leader is arrogant and self-serving. They believe that they are above the standards, that people must do what they say and not what they do. And you can go through this list and you can see it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So how do I act like a moral leader? How do I enact this notion of moral leadership? Well, number one, I need to realize business is not just about profit. It's also about values. And one of the things I think that is really, really important for us today to think about is that we can do good while doing well. And I think we need to continually think about how do I juxtapose those two elements, that I want to do good while doing well. I don't need to sacrifice what is good just for the sake of profit. The single most important factor in ethical decision making, and by the way, decision making in leadership is paramount. And you've got to think through, what are my decision making processes? And we'll talk about that more in another module. But decision making in organizations is where the leaders show a commitment to ethics in their talk and especially in their behavior. And remember, I said words create worlds. What you talk about is what becomes most important in that organization. So how do you act like a moral leader? There is a chart in your textbook. You can go through it. Articulate and uphold high moral principles. Focus on what is right for the organization as well as the people involved. And you can go through those and think them through. What are your core values? Our organization, we have articulated what our core values are. You want to make sure that your values, when you join an organization, align with the organization's values. If you're an entrepreneurial leader who's starting an organization, one of the things you want to make sure of is that you articulate the values of that organization, that they align with your values. And so you've got to think that through. Moral leaders distinguish right from wrong and do right. They seek the just, the honest, and the good in the practice of leadership. We end off with Kolb's 3 stages of moral development. And I want you to just think these through. You can look them up. Pre-conventional, you follow the rules to avoid punishment. Conventional, you live up to the expectations of others. But post-conventional is where you are in terms of moral maturity. And this is where you follow internalized, universal principles of justice and right. You balance concern for self with concern for others, and you look to do the greatest good. And so you act in an independent and ethical manner. When you're here or here, sometimes you will do things because of the pressure of others. But when you're here, you will act and speak in ways that align with your values, even if it is in contradistinction to what others say you should be doing. And organizations need that today.